Will be led by Cliff.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the roll call, and why don't we just, so we can record it, I suppose, start down this end and work our way down.
Jack Valentine.
Wendy Rackavan, Debbie Haley,
Clifford Branch.
Carl Moss,
Mike Woolridge,
EJ Sansone.
Mark Hunter, John Ledoux, Mike Coslow.
looks like everyone's present. And looking for a motion from someone to approve the minutes from our first meeting on the August 21st.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have one correction made to the minutes,
Okay,
spelling of my last name.
don't like it.
No. It should be WOOLDRIDG.
They're missing a D. Got it. All right, anyone else for any amendments to the minutes? And if not, first off, let's go ahead and see if we have someone making that motion.
Move to approve.
And we have a motion. Is there a second by Sid? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes. Introductions, we have for the presentation this evening with PGAV, Adam and Lindsay, I believe it is. We welcome you to this meeting and we go ahead and turn it over to you for your presentation.
Okay, sounds all right, Carl?
Yeah, would you like to maybe tell us a little bit about each of you?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and also we want to hear who you are as well. I know you just did roll call, but really, I don't know you or what your roles are, so I'd really love to hear that, and I'm sure you would as well. Filling in, Catherine and Andy and Lindsay and some other people on our staff will be spending a lot more time with you. My stay will be pretty short, but they had some other obligations tonight, so looking forward to hearing from them soon. I'm an associate director at PGAV. I've been there for about 7 years. John Brancaglione, I think a lot of you have met John over his time working for Darden Prairie, and he's the one who hired me. So I've been working with John for a while, and I've even touched some of the mapping and some of those the other comprehensive plan and even the update since then. What I want to do is advance the slide, but there we go. All right, as far as introductions go, I would like for, let's do this. If you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit about yourself, what your role is on the steering committee. Be a resident, could be representing an organization or development interest or a committee.
I'm Jack Valentine. I live in Ward 1, a resident for 2 years, so I'm president representative to.
Wendy Rackavan, sorry. I live over in Inverness. Previously, I lived in Aberdeen for 21 years. So I work for the Chamber of Commerce area, so.
Awesome. Thank you.
Debbie Haley. Couple minutes down the road off of Visey. You're a resident of Darden Prairie. Commercial broker. We have properties listed for sale in the immediate area. And figure out.
Cliff Branch. Live in Bainbridge, been there for 20 years. Right? And board seat.
Awesome. Carl?
I'm Carl Moss. I'm the chairman of the committee. I live in Cordova, been there for 4 years, and I'm president of the Cordova Residents Association.
Mike Woolridge, I'm a 8-year resident, or 7-year resident of Darden Prairie, fellows of Providence, chairman of the HOA. Have 43 years of municipal government experience in various roles, including overseeing planning process for the city.
Awesome. Well, get your last name spelled right in our deliverables.
Appreciate that.
Go ahead.
I'm EJ Sansone. I've been a resident of Garden Prairie since 2016. Moved here with my wife and kids. Shortly after that, I started development, which is the courtyards of Barrett-Haven and Garden Prairie, 47 villa homes, commercial broker, and then recently also completed a 2-year term as an alderman for the city and on this committee just to continue to advance the interests of Garden Prairie.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Mark Gunner, live in Ward 1, been a resident for 28 years. I was just interested in good master planning and establishing a vision.
I'm John Ledoux. I am the Assistant Fire Chief for Winsville Fire, which happens to be vast majority of Garden Prairie is within that district, probably 80%. I've worked in this community for 25 years and looking to help with safety and community risk reduction as well as economic development.
Awesome.
Mike Costello, I'm Ward 2, a resident for about 9 years now. In that 9 years, had 4 kids, all in Garden Prairie. So I am the representative from the Board of Aldermen on the committee.
And our resident IT expert tonight, apparently, right?
Fumbling through it, yeah.
All right.
My name is James Knowles. I'm the city administrator here in Garden Prairie.
Awesome. We know your role.
That's right.
All right. So thank you for the introductions. At PGA focus primarily on economic development all over the Midwest. What I want to do, this is the start of a long process, right? And it's an interactive process where we're going to be sharing a lot of ideas back and forth. And this is sort of the kickoff, the first step along that way. Plenty of steering committee interaction with PGAV, and then also plenty of interaction with the public too, to get their feedback, not only on what they want to see, but then after we've got some options out there and some visual aids, what do they think, right? And to take in that input. So tonight's meant to be more of a sort of a high level overview, but also we're really interested to hear what your initial thoughts are so that we can take it into the later meetings. Want to turn. Did I? No. I want to turn it over to Lindsay to talk through the process in depth, some initial kind of high level market stuff, and then we'll just start the conversation and start hearing what you want to see in these 2 focus areas.
Oh, close enough? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thanks so much, everyone. And thanks for the introductions. It's really helpful for us. Like Adam mentioned, I am new to you all, and Catherine and Andy, I think you've met before, but I'm happy to be here. And I'll be here throughout the process, working with you to get through all of the steering committee meetings and the public meetings to make sure that we find the best plan for you all. So this is, oh, now it works again. Great. So you'll have the agenda being passed just in case you want to follow it as well. And hopefully, yeah, okay, great. You can see the monitors above too. So that's showing exactly what I'm looking at here. So the planning process that we're going to be working through together, we're in the data acquisition phase right now. That's the first item on the list. And that's also the existing conditions, analyzing the existing conditions of the study area. And a number of, I think it's got to be at the right angle here, a number of steering committee meetings throughout the process. And so once we have your feedback from this initial steering committee meeting, we'll be working on the project website and an online survey. Part of this process is to get your feedback on what you might want to see in that survey. If there are specific items, questions that you want to be asked to the public, we could talk through that. We'll have an introductory public meeting with the larger public to understand their input on the process as well. The visualization part of the process is looking at sort of 3D study areas, what types of uses might work in those spaces and what massing those uses might take. We'll have a second steering committee meeting where we'll present that visualization to you. So you'll see that draft. We can walk through the feedback that we've heard from you tonight, also taking into account the data and the existing conditions that we've analyzed and create that first draft of the visualization. And that will be discussed at the next meeting with you all, steering committee meeting number 2. We'll take that feedback and we'll refine the visualization, and we'll come back and we'll have another steering committee meeting number 3. And then we'll have a public meeting to present that refined visualization to the public. With that input from the public, we'll have the final visualization and implementation plan for you all, and that'll be presented at the steering committee meeting number 4. So that's the outline, taking us through the next few months of this process with you. We'll be working with you in each part of the process. You hit next slide. I think it's maybe every other slide. Great, thank you. So this is a map of the planning area for this process, roughly bounded by 364 to the north and Technology Drive to the west and Post Road to the east. Thank you for the mouse backup. So that triangle is the planning area that we'll be discussing tonight. That's great market information. Thank you. You're good. Market information is the next slide, and that's great. Thank you. So the market information is, again, a high-level overview of the planning area, and the majority single-family residential community that you all live in will be the surrounding area to the planning area that we will study. There is a good amount of commercial with a very low vacancy rate in the surrounding area as well, with healthy rents and sale prices. And then we also have about 300 multifamily units and an 11.7% vacancy rate. That current inventory on single family ranges from 439,000 to 1.25 million for the single family residential. So as a suburban community that is in a growing part of the region, there's a lot of competition around, but you're conveniently located, and particularly for commercial development. And we can walk through what might make sense for the study areas that are part of the planning area that we identify with you all. And next slide. Great. Thank you so much. So again, the part of the process that we're in right now is the data collection and the existing conditions. And these are the types of items that we'll collect as part of the existing conditions. The current use of each of the land types surrounding the planning area, the zoning, the property ownership, the history of the sites, the condition of each of the parcels, relationship to other properties and potentially other municipalities and surrounding uses, and the relationship to each of the surrounding roadways and how the properties interact. And then next slide, please. Great. So in this triangle that is the planning area, there are 4 major zones of existing land uses. The commercial is in red, where you see the mouse. Thank you. And the recreation is in green, sort of a middle zone below 364. There's an institutional zone as well, and then residential sort of infills the middle in the yellow. And you all are very familiar with the planning area, but the commercial has the Town Square Shopping Center, the JCPenney, and the Target. The large movie theater is also included. And that has the Mers Farm area directly to the south, that small red area. And the recreation in the middle includes the park and the soccer fields. And the institutional in blue includes City Hall, where we're at tonight, an early childhood center, athletic fields, and a church as well. That residential is completely single family residential subdivision. So we'll walk through, as we get into the next section, which of these land uses do you think are working well? What needs to transition? And are there existing land use conflicts that you feel like between these uses? And I'll turn it over to Adam to walk you through that discussion.
Right. You can advance the slide, James. Okay, so just based on where the vacancies are, really, the vacant land, not so much vacant buildings, but these are where we see the opportunities. I think probably would agree, but are there any opportunities that you see that are not shown on the map? Just let them rip.
One of them, to the, in this orientation, to the left of Town Square, left of the Target, that house, is that part of Target?
Don't know.
Across from there.
Trying to look back at our zoning map here.
So to the left, yeah.
This one? Everything on that side of. We actually had a vendor.
It looks like there's a pretty clean line down there.
There was a house right here. Developed here.
And then along technology, the gap in between those two circles, I know that there's a lot of land in there that's currently for sale, isn't there? So.
Yep.
This area right here, that's currently the RV storage, owned by Lenny Kohler. Development is, you know, it's a package. Properties here, the old wagon wheel. The total is 25 acres. Base that is listed separately, but together. I mean, they're listed by the same listing agent, but technically have prices. This area right here is not listed for sale on Marion Drive. This area right here is a section which is proposed for development. Commercial area along this owned for approval. There's a section right behind it that has been single family or one.
Let's see, zoning.
So there's part of it is the outdated uptown zoning, which we've rezoned back about 2 years ago now toward the new development district, and instead of being a strict zoning district, it actually has a matrix that corresponds with essentially C2 or C3 zoning. Not something I've ever really dealt with before, but that was the zoning that was approved here 2 years ago. Originally, it was the Uptown Code. If you remember what I put in that little shared file that we had, the original Uptown zoning, it was the new urbanist kind of design that was done years ago. That's originally what was in that corridor. There's also a few parcels along that corridor, especially up here in Morris Farm Lane, that is actually zone C. So here, the town square area is zone C3, which is retail commercial. Some of these properties right here along Morris Farm Lane are also C3. I think there's one C3 here, and the rest of that is still the old Uptown, or what they call the new development district. Essentially C2 or C3 zoning, which depends on the usage. Most, the way our codes are written, most things along that corridor would require a commission. It's really by design, part because we have very little in our commercial code that is permissive. So everything that comes through has to go through planning and zoning, or the Board of Aldermen have the ability to have special conditions. The reason for that, of course, is so that he has more input into the development versus a straight zoning code, which would allow anything that's a use permitted by code. They could just want there as long as it met the administrative guidelines. some of those issues, I mean, those issues have been brought up in planning and zoning recently. That's really just been it's really been the city's strategy more or less for giving more input to the way the code is implemented. Lake St. Louis did that recently with their multifamily. Originally, the multifamily code was much more permissive, which is why you've seen so much multifamily go up in Lake St. Louis in the past couple of years. They put a moratorium on multifamily and then essentially changed their code to make almost all multifamily now, if it's going to be financially feasible, it's going to be a conditional because, or a PUD, land use development, because you can't build now. You can't build in Lake St. Louis a multifamily development and make money unless it's special permission because their density requirements are so strict because of the parking and everything. All of the requirements to build in their zoning is so strict now. In order to get a variance from that, you have to come to the city for a PUD, a planned use development, or special use. A little bit of background there.
I think the only exception to the vacant land rule would be the theater, which is right in the middle of one of those circles. Generally seen as maybe an opportunity to facelift or, upgrade the property or improve it in some way to return it to. It just looks a little tired, and it could probably be more. Any other opportunities that you all see? Before we dive into the focus areas? Yeah.
Got one comment to Lindsay's slides that you say we've only got 300 multifamily.
Yeah.
I think that's grossly under. There's a fair sized development off of Highway N. There's one in Bryan, Bryan and Winghaven area.
Mhm.
There's a new one going in at Bryan and Vicey. You've got right down the road down here, a so-called condo complex that can have 48 units, and then you got one right over off of Vicey and Hankey over.
Mhm.
That is a apartment.
Yeah.
I think you need to look at that number because I think
Honestly, when we were,
underestimated the
yeah.
number.
Agreed.
And James can probably get you.
Whatever data source we were using had 300, but as Lindsay and I drove around before the meeting, we're like, it's hard to tell where the boundaries are of this community, but we were like, man, this seems like. Gotcha. Well, we can certainly take a look at that.
There's a lot coming on. They're coming online. We'll make sure we get that number of both. We'll get that number to you both. Currently been approved.
Mhm.
But is.
Yeah.
Might be right once the town's. Once those have been built, I mean, that might.
It'll be over 1,000. Well, just between the two prairie projects, that's 600. And if you don't count the town,
Well, it's depends if you
well, each of them have right at.
I don't know how you count them as well. I mean, they're all attached.
But
Yeah, there's anywhere from 4 to 6 per row, I mean, it's multifamily.
and they're all rentals.
Not an apartment style.
And there is one that's already been approved for the north side. Very, very important for this one is just behind Target. So within the town square.
Yeah, the town, yeah, those are the.
Yeah,
And
thanks
then-
for pointing that out.
You got to bring that up because otherwise 300. So greater,
Sure.
that may not exist.
Sure. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then right there in front of Kinetic Park, there's the condos are going there right in the middle of the
Yeah,
opportunity area.
That's the 48 units.
Yeah, so that within that opportunity area, that one's already been sold and allocated.
So I think what we
Does the
should
old
do.
folks home down?
Depends on how you count it.
I think what we need to do is just commiserate between PGAV, James, understand what's in the pipeline, what's being completed and unloaded onto the market right now, just so that our numbers are accurate. Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. Thank you
And then
for
I've
pointing
got
that
a
out.
question,
Well, let me ask before we get off that topic. So I will be happy to get you the information of what's planned, approved, applied for, et cetera.
Mhm.
But on top of that, I guess just for our deliberation purpose, are we, we're in a metro area here.
Mhm.
Garden Prairie's crazy looking map, right?
Yeah.
Everything that's not in the colored area is also in our trade area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So might be important for us to recognize not just what's in the colored areas, but in the, I don't know how you best define that from planning perspective. If it's across the street, just like we were just talking about, right?
Mhm.
If this ended up being apartments right here in the area that is Lake St. Louis, not Garden Prairie, but
But it's in your
right
market.
here.
Yeah.
Still serving there.
For sure. Absolutely. So we'll consider that as well.
I will get about what is applied for, et cetera, and that to you, and then I can get it all. So attached villas, detached.
Mhm.
But is there anything else that you would like from us as far as put that information together?
Well, I guess if there's stuff in the pipeline from a commercial standpoint too, we would want to know that because, what we're potentially talking about, I'm not suggesting anything, but potentially talking about in the focus areas might be commercial, might be residential, whatever it is, to understand what's in the pipeline. Just because something doesn't show up on a map doesn't mean that it's not going to be there by the time the plan's finished or just in a year or two. So,
Okay.
yeah, and we'll understand the trade area because the boundaries, the development community's not paying attention to the boundaries so much, right? The trade area is the trade area. So we'll take a look at that as well. Okay.
On technology. Are all the parcels that are all within the corporate limits? Because I know the subdivision, I think, is in St. Charles County.
Right, Keystone Crossing, the area that was originally identified as residential, is all unincorporated. Along Marion Drive there, I think there's still 1-2 parcels that are still not. I mean, if you look at Google Maps, it shows you one thing. Well, you can.
Mhm.
You can still see there's a couple of white spots. So, I mean, there are still like 1 or 2 parcels, which are technically not. Ideally, if they were to be developed or redeveloped, conceivably, we would, as part of development, that was to be developed. Mass parcels would ask they be annexed in voluntarily as part of it.
But those parcels are surrounded by Darting Prairie.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's nobody else that can jump in and get them at this.
True.
So our process here maybe should consider those if they were to ever come into the city.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think the only thing that creates a problem with those two, they're not in the city limits, the corporate limits of Garden Prairie. So if we were to have large scale redevelopment there, they, at the end of this, decided to establish like a 353 corporation or redevelopment corporation to acquire properties or land bank or condemn or anything along those lines. Those properties are not within our purview. So if everybody around there wanted to develop or redevelop and those 2 properties wanted to hold out, can't do anything about those. St. Charles County would have to, because they're not within our corporate limits. We couldn't come in and say, sorry, we have a 353 corporation and we are going to condemn that property. Here's your money. And we're going to redevelop this property. Couldn't do that in those 2 spots. Is there a way around it? I don't know. That's something we'd have to talk to our city. But I mean, just conceivably, if we had a large scale redevelopment, we don't exercise authority over this.
Has the city ever gone out each to those surrounding that are communities that are surrounded by us in the county and
We have
interest?
We have, and we've taken under our current administration, we've had at least 2, if not 3, annexations within into the city of Garden Prairie. Previous administration, there was a few. There was a number of attempts that failed. But the way the annexation is occurred in St. Charles County, I mean, it's either voluntary,
Right.
the involuntary annexations, there's somebody that lives in those two empty properties.
Get to vote.
So they're not, those aren't going to be coming in involuntarily very easy. Unless somebody forgets to show up at the polls in those two houses.
Let's keep the conversation going.
Sure.
What you see on the screen right now are really the two focus areas for this scenario planning process. We're going to just refer to number one as MERS Farm, and then number two is Town Square and Post Road. Maybe a catchier name will come throughout this process, but for now, let's just refer to them as those two names. Scenario planning is not just about pretty pictures. It's also about understanding based on what we hear and the feedback we get from you as well as the community. But what does the parking look like? What is the potential tax revenue, right? That's something that we consider as part of a scenario, as well as residential units, commercial square footage, all of those sorts of things. So we look at scenario planning to understand what it could be, but we also want to understand what impact it will have on the community, the surrounding properties, but also the city's finances overall. So that's all a part of scenario planning. James, you want to advance another slide?
Can we pause there for just a second? Because I have
Yes,
a
sir.
question.
Yeah.
What is, so when we talk about these being focus areas, what does that mean compared to the other areas that are not focus areas? The reason I ask that is, in my mind, one of the greatest assets land-wise in Garden Prairie, most developable,
Mhm.
is that along technology with the
Sure.
frontage.
Mhm.
So why focus on those two and not the other, or does it really not matter?
James, do you want to provide any background on why those two were chosen, those two focus areas?
I think those were the original conversation, originally kind of focused around those two. But outset, Alderman Passo's point at the outset, triangle as a whole was recognized.
Mhm.
The city owning 10 acres on the southeast quadrant of Post and Town Square, that's been attempted to develop or redevelop or sell for over a decade.
Mhm.
When I first got here, I was tasked with sell that or do something with it, whatever. My feeling on it from the beginning was this is a key piece of land that could and should be the catalyst for whatever we decide as a community to develop along this corridor. So let's not give away our biggest chip, this commercial development game. The second part, this area identified by number one, is we do have, we have had multiple developers interested in doing something along that MERS Farm corridor, that area that is currently owned largely by St. Louis Bank. They would like to offload that from their books. We've asked them to work with us and not just to offload it, but to try to help us strategically develop it, making sure that it goes to a development or developer that comprehensively developed that corner of this triangle. So those are key. I mean, I think for us in general, I mean, everything along, to the Alderman's point, everything along that corridor on technology rather is important.
Mhm.
But for the purposes of supporting Town Square, which is a key development in this community, has been a key, and long-term viability of that is key to our financial stability as a community going forward. And then the fact that we are sitting on this 10 acres here, and what are we going to do with section of the quadrant 2 there? Those have been two key portions. The other thing I would suggest too is those are two of the most likely to produce retail, commercial, fully developable properties, which from a city standpoint, how we generally fund all of our city services. Everything that we do in this community is really funded by retail sales tax. Tomorrow night, we're going to have our tax levy for your personal property tax in the city of Garden Prairie. It's going down another cent again. We were at 9.69 cents, now going to 8.47 cents per hundred assessed value. We run the city based on sales tax. We pave your streets, we do everything we do based on sales tax. It doesn't have to be that way. Could be like Fallon and charge you 40 cents per hundred assessed value. But we've been very lucky to have everybody who shops in Darden Prairie helps pay for your benefit of our services. So we don't want to miss out on those opportunities. I think that's one of the reasons why that's key, because going forward, we don't have many other opportunities. Once those last few retail developable spots are developed, highly unlikely that we have any other places here in Garden Prairie that's going to create commercially developable retail spots. So without retail, we'll have to just shift how we tax and provide services. That's not to say the technology is not important. It is. In fact, I think these things will all work together at some point, but those are the focuses, short and medium term for the city.
Yeah, so I agree. It is an opportunity and it has been for quite some time. And just the 1 and 2, just because we're focusing on that now doesn't mean that maybe Technology Drive isn't an opportunity that we look at in the future, because I think it is very important.
I think to the Alderman's point, I want to make sure that I think for a long time we've recognized, at least in the last 2 years, number one can be developed, but it's the potential for the area that he's mentioning, down technology, could support whatever happens on.
Yeah.
We would like to see that whole commercial area thrive. How does whatever happens on technology, whether it's businesses, daytime traffic, office space, et cetera, whatever happens on technology, help support that? And I think those are things that we continue to consider. Should probably consider in this body as well. Maybe that's not the showcase area, but it's certainly an area that take number one.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And one supporting the shopping to the north too. You know, there's this sort of synergy that takes place. Well, the next slide is Merce Farm. And I'd love to hear, any initial thoughts from the steering committee, and haven't had as much action down on this side of the dais, but feel free to chime in and chip in. Anything that you're seeing as an opportunity or things that you would like to show up there.
So that the infrastructure kind of flows through here and kind of broken up and doesn't flow very well. Like all these parcels are kind of split up. You've got Merce Farm Road that runs through the gas station on the corner. But one thing that I don't know if it's feasible would be to straighten out that intersection and come through there. Obviously, you've got the mobile home piece right there, but just from an overall redevelopment standpoint, if something does gain traction, there's some way to kind of reconfigure what's there to make it accessible.
Right. That's an excellent point. So infrastructure reconfiguration, and we can look at several different configurations depending on what types of land uses that the scenario calls for. Any other thoughts on what you would like to see here?
I have a question. So.
Yeah.
Like what's a little background on why hasn't it been developed to date? Is it maybe a little background on that, but.
Okay. Yeah, great point. James, can you, have there been any recent proposals, maybe let's say within the last 5 years, for this site in particular?
From Town Square itself, I'm not. Documentation of what's been I don't recall or see anything north of Town Square Avenue that's been last 5 or more. That development was done right as overpass right here was built, so this was all, my thought always was that this was built and then they kind of cut it off. It actually was all happening at the same time. So back when this used to be literally a stoplight, you know, it was coming through here and this was a stoplight and in. And they were building this and they started building this even knowing this was happening. You would have thought that somebody might have called an audible and said, hey, maybe we should reconfigure this in the middle of, they didn't. I think Target, from what I understand, the old Shop and Save JCPenney were just so hard set on let's get in there and get open and be the first in, and that'll be good enough. But then they had to compete with Hawk Ridge and everything that got built on the other side later. I know that there were some residential areas here that is, which is Murs Farm. Obviously, this gas station, by the way, was, you know, the lone gas station at the corner of Inn and 40 at the stoplight back when that was probably like, that was probably golden to be there. Obviously now they're just, it's hard to get to and it's an odd location. We've had some proposals to move the gas station over to here, right here at this intersection. And, you know, obviously then creating something on a corner that's much more accessible from all lanes of traffic and all different directions. Then, you know, obviously what do you do with the old gas station? We do have this building right here, which was very much in disrepair right before I came about 3 years ago. A business, it's Crown Exteriors, Interiors. They bought and remodeled that and they use it as their office and then a warehouse back. It's very nice, but it's really just, as a whole, even the areas that are still operating there, I would call underdeveloped. Certainly not the maximum, you know, you're not getting the maximum usage, either the consumer or the community have this here and this here. Hard to get to this gas station. This is really not a location, even though marketed as such. So we've had a few different developments that have come in here. Everything that we've had come to us has been mixed use. So we're talking about apartments, retail, without giving any specifics because it's being closed session nature, we've had interest in hotels. So I mean, we do have a significant in this part of the community, this part of the county, don't have any hotels. We've had those sorts of uses interested in these areas. I think part of the problem is that still, even if you developed all of this, kind of leave this. I think the Board of Aldermen has always been concerned, and I've been concerned that you cut off an area that is eventually just going to choke down, not developed, or redeveloped, I should say. There's development there. How long is it going to last? A gas station. I understand it doesn't do great. I understand that a lot of the money, some of that money comes from that questionably illegal gaming facilities that they have in there, which I know the state legislature continues to struggle with. Would we be better off moving that, having them redevelop something else and moving a nice convenience store over to that corridor? I think we probably would, but how do we make all that happen? Probably has to be a comprehensive redevelopment, which is why, like, obviously the citizens influenced how we would like to see that developed.
I think within the development community, the biggest negative to this area is lack of access. You don't have good access off of Highway 40. The only way to get to this is you get off at Winghaven and come all the way. You gotta go, through the light, make the left, come all the way down and around. Or you gotta come from Lake St. Louis and loop all the way around and come back. Or you've gotta go down 364 Bryan Road and come all the way back. So from a retailer standpoint, it's a B- site at best for them, so when they're looking at opportunities, when you've got Hawk Ridge and, pad sites readily available over there, There's just not a lot of draw to it. You don't have great access.
One thing I would encourage all of you to think about is think aspirationally as far as, and PJ brings up an excellent point. Something the city has worked on for years is the potential to put some sort of a slip ramp or other access off of 40 along this corridor. It's expensive, questionable that it would fix more problems or make more problems, because the slip ramp would also create a condition you'd have to make technology here one way. And then you're also creating less access in one direction, create more access off of 40, but then less access coming south and east. I can't get over to it now, unfortunately, to my keyboard, but just so you know, the city has also looked at over here behind this area that is thinks it goes. The city or the MoDOT does own this right of way. And originally the plan was to have a exit off of 40 westbound to dump right there into technology, right there off of where 364 is. It's something that we've been talking to our legislators about. We've kind of found that old plan and knocked off the dust. The city has reserved some money potentially towards that. MoDOT's approval, MoDOT already owns the right of way, so land acquisition is not an issue. Building, engineering, all of that. So one of the things that we are continually told, like, we're not going to build something so that you can meet development. Show me you have a development. We'll consider building it. And by the way, the city is money. I think this board really needs to, this commission really needs to think aspirationally, like, hey, it may not be something that we will get, but maybe this is something we could get if we had A or B as well. A or B maybe being better access, then letting the city and the staff continue to push that, both from a political and administrative standpoint. We do, like I said, we do have some money that we've identified as potentially being put towards it if MoDOT would say okay. So that has been a condition that's struggled to help this area develop, but it's something that we've identified as maybe we can fix.
I can speak to that a little bit as well, as far as the plan for using a possible slip ramp in the area that you were just describing. I also sit on the St. Charles County Road Board, and this has come up multiple times. I know other cities that would have an interest in utilizing more traffic to funnel around this immediate area. Have also talked to MoDOT. So in my opinion, it should be a joint effort for all the cities involved in the county that would receive a benefit from having better access there. And I mean, we see projects come in from cities all year long, and just like this one. So a moment ago, you said, why should we spend money on this road when we are not sure who's going to come yet? I think that was your, that happens sometimes when cities recognize that there is a stumbling block in a specific area and they need a new road. They need some infrastructure to help grow that part of town. And so they will request funds from the road board and MoDOT and see if we can get some buy-in from the governor's cost share or wherever the funds will come from. And they may not have the person or the tenant or the developer in mind yet, but they know that this is an area that needs some help. And so we'll receive, as a road board, we'll receive a project in front of us for consideration. And we generally say, I mean, I wouldn't say generally, but if it makes sense and they've already applied with MoDOT and with other funding resources where there's a match where you can get a bigger bang for your buck, we usually always say yes to those projects because it's being shared by a number of funding resources. And I would also say that if you would go in now and try and figure that out with all the other entities around to see if we can push something forward to get better access here for Garden Prairie, which I think Jay is completely right. I have several pieces for sale, and that's the first question that developers ask is, how do you get to this piece? What's the access like? What's the plan for getting to this side of the? So I talk about, well, they're thinking about this or they're thinking about that. Well, they're not gonna come until they know how you're gonna get there. So I think it would be really important to figure that part out. Access. Otherwise, I have almost zero interest from the development community to even that piece that you were talking about earlier, the Lake St. Louis part. I have that listed for sale. I had that sold, actually, to the storage unit guy. It's a big national firm. Lake St. Louis killed that deal. That should have happened probably in that spot, but they said no. And I'm still trying to figure out what they want there. So it's very difficult to bring buyers when you have some access blocks like that. So I think that would be key to this whole effort. This whole thing is to figure out how do we get people here? How do we draw them? Because EJ is right that the big developers who have the big tenants, they have site development requirements, and access is a biggie. They can't see a clear way to get here. They'll just go someplace else. And then I would say one thing about this area right here across from the town square is I really like the idea of reconfiguring the infrastructure and doing something much better than what's there right now. And I particularly like something in my mind. You said think inspired. I live here. I would love to have a Cottleville feel to this community because I've developed property too. And you can go in with a site plan that says I'm going to do a PUD mixed use to get my density, my villa stuff, and then put a couple of retail-ish things in the front and hope they go sometime just so I can get my villas in. I mean, that happens all the time. But I think this area could be more special than that. I would love to see something really cool. Exactly what that should look like. Maybe we can all figure that out in the next 6 months. But I would love to see something really cool that the people who live here and people who live around here would come here for a reason that they would really want to come here. They could get here for one starters and then come here because we put something really cool here that's a draw for young families, all ages. So exactly what that is, I don't know, but that's what I have in mind for this whole part right here. Perfect spot. Put something across from all the big boxes that are already there. Plus, it's not very far from all your parks, that are right here. The big Catholic church, I mean, they're loaded with kids. I don't know, again, I don't know exactly what it would be, but that whole square, that rectangle would be something really cool.
So let me just ask this question because I think it's key to infrastructure question. We are doing some work on Town Square this upcoming year, just overlayment. We're not doing any reconfiguring. We're not doing any multimodal transportation changes. However, to your point, we're really looking at some of the key areas in our communities, like to Garden Landing, Garden Meadows, Bainbridge, Inverness, and even Wyndham Meadows down along Town Square. So it's not in our city limits, it's in a community crossing right there. We also need to keep in mind infrastructure improvements maybe along Town Square, which might create better connectivity means other than just your traditional driving car, whether that's biking, golf carts, whatever, to help for that unique cool thing that we might have there, how do we create that and how do we make it better connected to people who live in Wyndham Meadows who say like, I want to go to this new cool thing down at Mars Farm, but I don't want to drive downtown square in my golf cart. Maybe there's a path. Golf cart lane, these are things that we might want to consider also. Just from an infrastructure, longer term infrastructural improvement standpoint, how can we better design things as a community, help facilitate those cool things that we can build these spaces.
Yeah, this is definitely an opportunity for everybody to dream big, particularly at the beginning of the process, and not throw out any ideas because they're kind of crazy. And when you hear from PGAV again, you'll have had the existing conditions report. So to your point, sir, about, well, what's happened here? What's the opportunity? We supply a report to you. You'll have a better understanding of what's been proposed here, what the ownership looks like, what the zoning looks like, and what basically what's your toolbox, right? What could go here, and then have a better informed way of dreaming, because that's really what we're here to do, is listen to you dream, listen to the community dream, and then for us to kind of visualize what it might look like. Do we want to I don't want to cut anybody off. Any other comments on the Merce Farm area? I think the infrastructure comments were very well said. Anything else before we move to the second focus area?
I did have one question. So you're pulling together a plan like this. When we launched this, it was like, well, there's the uncertainty factor, like, well, we'll know it when we see it. I mean, like, how prescriptive do we want to get here? Or do you say, well, there's a plan that if the highway off ramp happens, it kind of looks like this. Maybe in parallel, you have a plan B that, your access really is town square, and we're going to build something cool for Darden Prairie and give us an identity. Pursue that. I mean, is that typical for these kind of plans, or are we kind of driving towards a level of certainty for developers to say, you know what, we know what we want. We're not just going to go in circles with proposals and fight about it. We know what we want, and if you show up with what we're looking for, then it's a good chance it's going to go. I mean, I guess that's kind of an open-ended question for like, what's, what are we driving towards?
I think there's a lot of advantages to staying flexible. For example, if we had a scenario that has the slip ramp, does that eliminate, eliminate any possibility of having, we do the cool entrance, does it eliminate the possibility of having the slip ramp? I think we need to build in flexibility to potentially do both. Where does the cool part start and where does the slip ramp stop? I think there's beauty in flexibility. Your zoning code, as I understand it, has a lot of prescriptive measures in there to make sure that you get a high quality development. And I believe the sort of the foundation for the new development zoning district was to say, we want to make sure we get something nice, and not compromise in any way. So I think we want flexibility, but it's kind of a balance. I'm going to kind of do a cop out and say it's a balance between both. You want to be prescriptive because you want to put your vision out there and attract developers who are interested in that same vision, but you also want to have the possibility of potentially doing a slip ramp later. That's at least my input. Now, if everybody says absolutely not, slip ramps are terrible, then maybe we don't go there. But I do think we need to consider it.
I think from the city staff perspective, we just would like, because the zoning code is so broad, we would like to have an idea of, I get the question all the time, what would the board want to put there? I'm like, hey, if you knew that, I'll give you $1 million. What do you think planning and zoning would say yes to? I'm like, hey, you gonna buy me a lottery ticket? So, because we don't, I mean, honestly, there's such a broad code says, we'll take these 4 uses are permitted. Everything else is on condition, right? So when somebody comes and says, what's a conditional use? I'm like, yeah, it is, but I don't know what conditions they're going to say in order for them to say yes to that use. If we could narrow that down, as a group, and you say, this is where we would like to see, this is what our vision is. I think now we have a starting point. Now it's, yeah, I think these are the things that they want. They've kind of identified that. Now we're just hammering out the fine. Now it's, what are you gonna make the building out of? How nice you're gonna make it? What's it gonna look like? What are you gonna cater to? What kind of amenities are you gonna have? Right now, there's 30 things that with conditions will allow. So I think it's helping us narrow that down and helping us shepherd developers through. It also helps us to affirmatively go after developers and say, we already have an affirmative statement from community. This is what we want. When you come here, you might get beat up a little bit, but you're not getting clobbered at the podium. Have an idea.
And I think we wouldn't be doing the scenario planning process if we didn't want to narrow it down a little bit,
Yeah.
to provide
Be
that.
flexible still, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Any other comments about Merce Farm area? Hearing none. We'll go to the Town Square and Post Road area. So, the northwestern quadrant is obviously spoken for. I think that use is going anywhere, nor should it. And then you've got some stuff to the northeast as well. Really what we're talking about are the two southern quadrants. Is there anything that comes to mind as what you might want to see here, or where the opportunities are? Maybe we start with background. Any development proposals on the books so far for these areas?
So, was this quadrant right here, the southeast quadrant was acquired by this, that was original town plan, southeast city quadrant. There was supposed to be this. So this had, over the last almost 20 years, several iterations of plaza space. That's what this has been. Also gone out RFP developers develop with the city this 10-acre quadrant on multiple occasions. Again, that's always been some sort of like maybe retail component. 1 acres and maybe surrounded by both plaza space and probably residential mixed, multifamily residential. That's more or less the designs I've seen going back to the original uptown, what they called the uptown. This area right here, contract for ownership. This property is owned and it's been constantly marketed. Only like 1 or 2 acres. They own. Bought it for way too much money. They've come to us multiple times and wanted to put apartments there or something there. And without the rest of this, it's just not really been. I do know that a developer did make an offer on this property. I 5.7 is thus far. Further down, you have Twin Edge landscaping and Rodens. Rodens did annex into the city about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. And they have said that, hey, if development comes through, they're out. They have to sell and go. But that's just one piece. This property here, by the way, is under development. There's a creek that bisects this diagonally. There's a 5,000 square foot retail space coming up front here. 24 units here, 24 units across the creek of condo space that's going to be construction. You might see that next take care of their adjacent ICD part of Kinetic Park. This property here, there's 3 acres here, 3 acres is occupied, 3 acres that's empty for the retaining on for Winter Meadows. The first 3 acres has been purchased. That all was part of the Gentleman Farm, which we did acquire some of the athletic fields. Those 3 acres, there is currently someone who continues to want to develop that, but I've encouraged them to. But may come from this body here for some direction as to what they would do. They're a commercial developer, so they'd like to use it commercially. The other 6 acres, that's all owned by 3 siblings. Hard to say, they'll all budge or on anything. But realistically, I told the developer who bought the 3 acres that they wanted to, of course, put a multifamily, doesn't meet our multifamily code to do so, and highly unlikely it's going to be 3 acres. But if we get 9 acres there, then maybe we can talk about something different. That's kind of interesting. The owner of that property is a Darden Prairie resident.
So with that being said, any initial thoughts from the steering committee?
What does everyone think is like Garden Prairie? So what would anyone think? Oh, this would be it, or is it the others? That might. What? They would want to go forward with proposals on everybody thought.
I personally think that this area here is, and that kind of plays in also to Post Road and Current Road that are in the works there. I see Post Road as an underutilized road that could be the front door into Darden Prairie. It leads straight into what would be our downtown where our city hall is. And I see this as the lowest hanging fruit to make something happen. The city owns it. The city has leverage. The city could bring it to the table, partner with the developer, offer creative financing. So in my mind, I see this as the lowest hanging fruit to make something happen. But in developing this, and as we talk about the other area that we just talked about, I think connectivity between the two is an important factor. I see as Merce Farm, may ultimately get developed, which I think there's more challenges there because of the infrastructure and access. This could be developed and then you kind of bridge the two together and create better access through here. We talked about Cottleville, and I think one of the things that makes Cottleville so successful is their pedestrian access. The golf carts, people love it. It allows them to get around. We in Darden Prairie have an ordinance that allows for golf carts to be driven, but they can only be driven on roads that are 35 mile per hour or 30 mile per hour speed limit or less. You can cross a road that has a 45 mile per hour speed limit or less, or they can be driven on sidewalks that are 6 feet or wider. You really can't get anywhere in Darden Prairie on a golf cart with those restrictions. So either that has to be loosened up or we've got to create infrastructure that makes it more accessible to get around. And if this were to get developed and we're shooting for Merce Farm, anything that gets developed along, Town Square, put a 6-foot sidewalk in there as a condition of development to allow people to get from point A to point B. So I see this as kind of the first piece to go, but also keeping in mind what we're trying to accomplish in bringing those 2 points together.
I will tell you just from the St. Charles County, like they had a bike pedestrian plan that they created recently that's been updated to bike enthusiasts who are not happy about this, but the idea of golf carts or some other form of motorized vehicle, whether it's also been in front of you. Their view forward is instead of taking a very specific focus on like bikes and pedestrians, let's start focusing these. Let's start planning these paths to accept electric motorized vehicles. I know that that's upset some people in that, on the road board. I know they're not happy with it, but that's the route they're going, as now it went from, hey, we should talk about bike ped to bike ped, whether it's golf cart, electric scooters, electric e-bikes, whatever. That's how do we create that as part of the plan? So that is countywide, that's kind of the focus. Trying to have that interconnectivity, different modes of transportation, off-street modes of transportation, large cases.
They're calling that a shared use path now, and in
Right.
some places they're 10 feet wide. So they can accommodate a lot of things. And they are talking about the city representatives, the engineers that come in from the cities to present. And the road board as a whole have been talking about a collaboration between all of the cities now within the whole county to put forth an effort to kind of eventually, when everything is developed and like EJ said, you put that on the developer when they want to develop a piece of ground. This is part of the plan. So you have to put the shared use path, you have to put the street lights, you have to put the fencing or, the landscaping or however that's supposed to look in front of your piece that you have to all that. So that's been going on for a long time, but this is it sounds like more of a concerted effort to do that everywhere now. So in another place where they're doing a 10-foot path because they don't have the space, but in St. Charles City, they're doing for connectivity. The city brought this forward, and even if the road board doesn't give them any money, they're doing it on their own anyway, because they need to get to Frenchtown. So from Kings Highway, they need to get to Frenchtown. So they're gonna take Clark Street and make Clark Street like a boulevard. So they're doing special lighting, they're doing, it looks beautiful if you pull up that plan. I don't know when it's gonna ever happen or how it's gonna get funded, but that's what and so to EJ's point, if you take this piece and you go to the MERS farm and you purposefully build that infrastructure on both sides of the street, and you have these beautiful street lights and you've got lighting and you've got landscaping and it's a very boulevard, vacation-y feel to where you live, that people actually want to spend time. They can walk, bike, ride the golf cart. I know there's a lot of golf carts, or there's been some accidents and whatnot, but for the most part, they do great. I'm all for the golf carts. I have a horse and a cart, so I'm for the horse cart too. I could go the old fashioned way, but, that would be really, cool if this is the create that boulevard access, and no matter if the slip ramp coming or not, which I think is really important, but if it doesn't happen in time for this to work, but the city wants to, while we're all still alive. That would be a really cool way to connect those two. There's a lot of empty space, along this whole corridor. Pieces that haven't, like the Rodens landscape, if they would sell out. There's a lot of not packed full of stuff that would be really expensive to tear down.
Does anybody have a different opinion about what the entry point is? Go ahead,
I
Carl.
agree with what's been said concerning the property that's the city already owns the 10 acres of creating something exciting there. Taking and doing what you've just described as far as a pathway down to MERS. Taking what James talked about, which would be wonderful to have a very nice upscale, not just a hotel, but an upscale hotel, tying some of these things together. I had everything I wanted. I go ahead and figure out a way to get that ramp off of highway back into that MERS area to make it sing, make it be a place to get to. Those are some of the things that I'd like to see.
Very
I
good point.
think-
Yes.
The not against one-way roads, but I think the one thing you need to think about is there isn't an outer road on the south side of 4064. So how are you gonna get those people back around? Now, how are they gonna know when to turn from there and then they have to go back? Because they can't, it's not like 70 where one side goes west and the other side goes east. If you miss your business, you have to completely go and find them again. So I could see that being an issue. But as I'm, making a list of different stuff that I would like to have, not that it's about me, but like we don't have, unless I'm mistaken, we don't have a coffee shop where you can go in and sit down and have coffee. Not in Darting Prairie. There's one in O'Fallon. There's several in O'Fallon, but there's none in Darting Prairie. There's no event space. So if someone wanted to have business meeting or a wedding reception, there's no place unless you want to have it in, I guess, the KC Hall, which is across from this church. There's no rooftop dining. And when they had the rooftop dining over at Llewellyn's on the O'Fallon side, it was tough to get a seat up there. And, for me, I feel like a reason why it failed was probably a little bit of management or the ownership that didn't figure out how to run it. But when we would go there, it was crowded all night. And with the soccer fields right there, they had a lot of traffic. So we've got the ball fields, we've got the soccer fields at ICD. The volleyball stuff that's at ICD. I mean, you have all the sports and the kids. So there's no place in the city where they can go after a game, like as a team to go get ice cream, or if they're at a tournament to get coffee or breakfast or, so those are a couple things. We were in Alabama at the beginning of the year, and where we stayed, there was a supermarket called Fresh Market. And it was like a smaller, condensed Trader Joe's, Whole Foods type store. We were there 5 days and we were probably in that store 6 times. So I reached out to that Fresh Market and told them that they should consider expanding up here.
Right.
But there are other places other than Whole Foods and Trader Joe's that would be great. So maybe that would fit into that Hers Farm location. And then maybe Town Square doing the things that would attract those families, the ice cream shop, the coffee shops, whatever. I feel like the traffic on Highway N is at times, certain times of day can be really crazy. So I don't know if it's ever been looked at to widen it from the 2 lanes that it is. I don't know, or like a roundabout instead of the 4-way light at the way end, but I don't know, just a couple random thoughts going through my head.
Yeah, those are great.
And my other thought is Newtown in St. Charles. They have all of that great business inside, but they don't advertise to anybody other than the people in Newtown. So those businesses really struggle. So,
Could see, yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, those are the new thoughts that we haven't heard. Absolutely. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and full disclosure, suppose. I like your idea with coffee shop and things of that sort. I don't know who has been down in St. Charles City, down behind the streets of St. Charles, where they're putting in the chicken and pickle. I don't know if they would even be willing to consider, but I think that would be a nice addition on the ground, the 10 acres, along with coffee shops and things are different, different ages. But that's something I think that will not just be a flash in the pan type of thing with chicken and pickle, and would bring people in, might fit in well with, crazy vision I have with the hotel down in MERS. I'm not an engineer, so I understand what you're saying as far as, the challenge with not having a one-way. But I would think from an engineering standpoint, there's got to be a way to be able to get traffic off of the highway into that area. Might be a little bit of a challenge, but I think there's probably ways it could be done, which would make use of that property and much better use
How
than
do you
they're.
get them off, but how do you get them back on the highway if they're?
Well, they're just gonna live here.
You
and
know.
stay. Once they get here. Yeah, I know, I'm saying, yeah, I don't have the answers to all of it right now, but, just thinking that's something. I mean, the overpass there seems as if the highway and overpass might give them an opportunity to get back heading the other direction. Again, I don't have it all in front of me right now, but just trying to figure out how to utilize the ground to the highest potential. Get the most that we can out of the area.
Sure.
I have a question for the board members and for you guys.
Mhm.
The two last folks that talked had great ideas about specific users.
Mhm.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, this city does not have an economic development director. Is that right? We don't have somebody assigned to that. So other cities do, and there's somebody that's taking all of these.
I do.
Yeah, and they're going after them. They go after as a city. They go after those specific, just like I go after specific tenants for a spot that I need to
Sure.
fill.
Yeah.
How are we gonna handle that component once we figure out what we want, that out? I just wonder if this is the right meeting to ask that question, but how do we go get all of those ideas?
That's a great question. You want to,
Like we're in a trick.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that.
I'll give my response to that. I think that is probably some feedback that this committee could give to the
Mhm.
city is, but it's an execution of the vision. I think it's a good piece of feedback to give.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard for the past 10 minutes is something that has been in conversation quite a bit, and that is third spaces. Those places that people can go to hang out, to socialize. They aren't necessarily pressed to spend a whole bunch of money to stay there. It's not very formal. The coffee shops, the congregation, the really low sales pressure kind of retail shops, the window shopping and that kind of stuff. I'm kind of hearing that theme quite a bit here. Is Darden Prairie the place that you go to hang out for a while and just let off some steam and relax? And I would agree with it. I think that kind of is the culture. We come from an area that is heavily farmed in the past, and we have a lot of those farmers that still live here, and we still retain a lot of that rural, slower feel that we haven't picked up the hustle and bustle of the cities. The other thing I wanted to note, there has been conversation. I don't think it's any big secret that it's not been in Mid Rivers Mall that I've seen, or Mid Rivers Magazine. Is that there is talk about over the next 5 years or so reconfiguration of the interchange there, 364 and it's the so 6440 and 364 and a reconfiguration of a lot of that. And I think that's an opportunity there to work with MoDOT on getting access. So not necessarily even being restricted to a slip ramp or one way, because you know there's a lot of apprehension doing one-way streets and things like that from MoDOT's perspective. But I think that we do have some opportunity there in different discussions about how we can leverage that redesign to score. So, Wendy, your comments were very well founded.
Any other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add, I agree with pretty much what the direction the group's going. I've always felt that this little area here has always been the heart and soul as you're right across from the Catholic Church. that the old part of the city is right here. This is it. So I think, something like an entertainment district, something like I was talking about, just a hangout place is right on spot with being downtown and that kind of area. I did hear, we were talking a little bit about the pickleball thing and that kind of idea. I do know over at Lake St. Louis in the front of the mall over there, there's a large development coming that is going to have a outdoor skating rink in the winter and a pickleball thing in the summer. So, I mean, to be that specific, I don't know that that's getting a little weedy, but I guess my question to you, Adam, is how are we going to look at the adjacent communities and blend it and make it work and then not just do something that is hot over here? That's just like, well, we just wasted the money. You know, I love the Cottleville idea. Just don't know how we make sure we've got a value for what we're doing here.
I think we need to think about it throughout the process. So Mike pointed out, hey, we got more than 300 multifamily units. Oh, and by the way, it's not just Garden Prairie city boundaries. That our trade area goes beyond that. So I think in the existing conditions report, we'll look at things like that. Some of the highly popular land uses. Now, in terms of pickleball specifically, or things like that, I think it's sort of there's a reason why this is an iterative process. Once those new ideas come up, we can think about where are the nearest competitors. Some things it probably could exist in every community. You know, every community can have one. If it's a pickleball, just stadium or whatever, maybe there's only one of those that needs to happen in a county or in a region. So we'll be cognizant of that and just as we come up with new ideas. I think we need to be aware if it's something that a region only needs one of, or if there's something that we can have right here in Garden Prairie, just for the residents here.
Last point I'll make is that on that zone 1, the hotel, the banquet, the conference, I think is something that's needed. I have a couple friends that are high up in some of the management companies in this area, and they're telling me they're 99% full all the time. So I don't think you can go wrong with those kind of spaces. I think that fits down in that area a little bit better. I know for me as a traveler, I just put in my GPS and I'll find it. I know it's right there. I can see it. So.
Excellent points. Any other feedback before I talk about next steps?
You know what I do.
Yep.
You know, I think about a town square. So, you know, we've talked, the mixed use comes up. It's where like someone brought up about the theater. Is that something that is going to be long-term forever or a change? So maybe you think about, you know, is that area when you think about when I think about mixed use, it's like, so you have a certain amount of commercial or businesses, and then do you have the, you know, like the adjacent residents to support it, kind of like we went through on the Encore debates. So I kind of think about that for the town square, and then, you know, just in general, I think when we launched this, we talked about, you know, establishing vision. Is there like a population goal for the city where you get that mix and we have X people need this amount of commercial and business to get a tax rate of this? I mean, that's kind of an engineer by trade. So I kind of think in terms of, you know, kind of solving the equation. That's what seems like I really like what we're doing here, but it's like, I'm a little bit, I'm not grounded on like, what are we working towards? With that mix of population, business and tax rate. And then I could say, okay, well, I do want a little more multifamily, or I do need this or that to kind of make that triangle work.
I will tell you, just for historical value, this area like Moore's Farm, a lot of the conversation, especially because if you look at the trade area here, we've built a much larger area now that you have Hawk Ridge, that you're across the highway that you're competing with. A lot more commercial. So where are the people who are shopping currently? Just to sustain current retail, both with Target, JCPenney, and what is it that we need to sustain that? So we talked about rooftops for some time. Now, what does rooftops mean? Is that rooftops family or multifamily? We only have so much space. How many rooftops do you need? So that's been a conversation for a while about whether or not get enough rooftops in this area, you know, whether or not the density has to be higher in order to get, again, enough customer base for this development to be successful, and then hopefully grow it, you know, the area that's underutilized across the street in Mercer Lane. I can tell you, we do have the information, which PGAV probably has, but I can. We have aggregate cell phone data that we have that tracks that people shopping, where they go, and they kind of go and migrate from Hawk Ridge to this, and over to ICD and back. There's like this, you know, it's all just you know, moms dropping their kids off at ICD and soccer moms and everything else, but all along that town square corridor, there's people shopping up and down. Walmart, Schnucks, Target, ICD, or ball fields and back. There's a lot of that traffic. But there's also an increasing number of vendors. So yes, that has been historically what we need with this. To have people. We can't draw from as far out as we used to because there's a lot more competitors. So how do we build people around this area? That's kind of where we had been focused.
What percent of the sales tax would you estimate is coming from outside of the city? Based upon that cell phone.
I don't think we've really ever cross-referenced that, so that's a good question. I mean, we have cell phone trip data, but I mean, I don't know if people are stopping and buying their kids ice cream on their ICD, and doing that percentage shopping and dropping $200. I can't walk in and out of Sam's without spending $100, right? But there's times where I go in there, I spend $400. So depending on which Sam's I'm at, if I'm out here, you know, Wentzville, or if I'm back, you know, home, depends which Sam's is the $400, or which one I'm just buying toilet paper and eggs. So we don't have
the reason why
we don't have that level of data, unfortunately.
The reason why I asked the question is that when you really look at it from the map, this area is the furthest west point of the city.
Right.
And the people on the far east side are not necessarily going to traipse over this side because there's other opportunities outside of the city, so forth. But there are a lot of people out on this west side, and it's continuing to develop that can be brought in.
I think we just looked at the number of.
Because I don't think it's going to be necessarily the number of people. I mean, it helps, but it's not going to be a huge influx of people that you want to bring in that's really going to make that.
I think if you look at the number of the people who are shopping, and of course, that's not dollar value, just trip data. I mean, the people who are shopping in this area, less than a quarter probably don't. So people in Lake St. Louis, people as far as Troy, people from zip codes, even though we get, we also get zip code data. Zip codes are all over the place. So I wonder, like, where the hell from? I'm living in Florissant, but I see that, like, there's people from Florissant that are shopping out here all the time. I don't know if they work at MasterCard. I don't know where they're working, but somehow they're out here. Maybe they're a firefighter in Lake St. Louis, but that happens. You know, we see those data points all the time. I would say probably everybody on the south side of town shopping over on K and the shops there, down there, down on Mid Rivers Mall or somewhere else, or hell, even Chesterfield. But up here, where these people shopping up here, I mean, you get people from Troy, you get people from all over. We see those data points all the time. So, but I think that's a lot of our, you know, what we have anchored there right now is grocery. a lot of that's grocery and Target, right? So we changed the look of what that does in the future. We put entertainment there, then we're also still talking about a wider draw, right? We're talking about people who come from other parts of the community to that destination. It's unique, it's different, it's cool. I think you're gonna have that draw, but you're also gonna want just the staples. Probably gonna want something in that core area to be the staple support that whatever develops. Whether people just going down the street to get something, gas, milk, eggs. I think that's that core group. Anything else, I think. I honestly, after COVID, so much of that's still evolving. How, shopping habits, shopping trends. I think that's why you see a lot of developments like to develop around multifamily, because developing around offices is no longer valid, right? The old days of saying like, well, hey, I'm going to build right here in the middle of Westport where all these people come to work. Well, nobody goes to work there anymore because they all work from home. So where do you go build your retail or your business now? People live, not where they used to. Everybody works at home.
Mike, to your point, where are people traveling from to shop in Garden Prairie? So we also have that data. It's the creepy cell phone data. Extremely creepy, extremely useful though on the other end of the equation. For something that isn't there. So if it were, again, I heard Streets of St. Charles mentioned. If it were something like that, we would study the visitation to Streets of St. Charles and figure out how far people are coming to something like that. How many are coming from the actual community versus how many are traveling, or really they're tourists to Streets of St. Charles. Because there's no Streets of St. Charles-esque thing here now, we can't track cell phone data that's not there. But what we can do is take that data and extrapolate it and form some sort of prediction about what we think visitation could look like. And that's part of the scenario planning, is to understand the numbers and the impact on the community. We can look at your existing retailers. We can figure out where they came from, how far they traveled, demographic information, as well as where they went immediately before Walmart and where they went, or Target, and where they went immediately after Target. Again, it's creepy stuff, but it's extremely useful for this conversation here. So we provide that as part of our scenario planning exercise. Good point. Yes. Hey, we're always in the dreaming game. Right.
Have, farmer's market. Most of the years their number. Very. I don't know if that helps. Other than that might be that type. Last year they were number. That down with one. Asking a bunch of. Start this, what happens? Community college there, the community colleges actually help to fund. They give a lot of space away and they charge money for. I didn't know if that was something.
Well, I think farmers markets are certainly a draw. And oftentimes they're in flexible spaces, right? It could be a parking lot, it could be, I sold at the Tower Grove Farmers Market a couple of years ago, I made bagels and I sold them there. And what I found was that people were coming from all over the place. But as soon as the market closed, you didn't even know it was a market anymore. It was back to Tower Grove Park. So if there is something like that that you guys want to pursue, then a flexible space with appropriate parking and access should be something that we consider. And again, it might be parking for the businesses one day, and then on Saturday morning, it completely changed. And you didn't have to necessarily build anything to make that happen. Maybe there's some electrical outlets and hookups, or maybe a pavilion. I've seen Tower Grove, or I've seen farmers markets that have built-in pavilions and that sort of thing, or bathrooms at least. But that can be a flexible space. That's a good
Looks
point.
like the cinema, taken quite often. Large enough to house something like that, but I think even some revenue that I generate for them, something like that.
Yeah, what they have going on in Columbia is mostly open. They have some buildings that are closed in where they're the classroom type space, and they got the kids stuff and all kinds of things. And they're open almost every day of the week. Something. Even in the wintertime, I think they go down to maybe 2 days. Stuff because most of it, local vegetables and local people. But there are people from Illinois that come in. They come from all over. So there's that type of use, and then depending on how it was built or laid out, maybe then the rest of it could house something like what Cottleville has, and I'm not trying to duplicate something somebody else has already done, because I don't know how that would go, but I don't think anybody has. I know there's farmers markets around, but there is no farmers market like Columbia. It is just amazing. I can't believe it every time we go there. They're even building on and adding, all funded by.
Yeah.
That was just an idea.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. Yeah. James, can we go to the last slide I've got? We're coming up on 2 hours. Don't want to cut off the conversation because we're going to be talking more as we go through this process. But in terms of next steps, I'd like to put together a project website for this, for as a way to disseminate information to the community as well as to you. That is where we would launch an online survey to ask questions like the ones we've talked about tonight, but also, do you consider this a gateway to the community? And what does that mean for you? What would you like to see? Very, very basic questions like that, as well as hopefully getting into some more detailed questions later on. We got to talk to the public, right? That's an important part of this process. And then I think the reason why the visualization says October, November, and steering committee number 2 is early November is because those are flexible. And as we process, maybe we need to come back to steering committee again before the visualization, right? We got to draw something. We have to understand what we're drawing. So I think additional feedback is required, and we can talk about that as a group and certainly talk about that with James. But this is what you can look forward to over the next couple months. I know our staff is looking forward to hearing your ideas a little bit more and hearing the ideas of the public and working through this. James, do you have anything to add?
I'm just gonna let you know, so we have on one of our, on our outline potential dates, October 24th, 25th, or 30th, November 1st or 2nd for, quite possibly having our public engagement. So this would be the next step where we would take the online survey, we would take some of the information we would have maybe here, or if it ends up being on like the 25th of the 1st, we have something going on in this room, we might go over to like ICD and have their community space, an open house, both public engagement, provide information and take information from residents. Part of the process, it's part of the visualization process too. So I will send those dates out to everyone. I would think all of you would want to be there to take in what residents say. So I'd like to get that posted as soon as possible. So we can start putting that both through social media, news bag, all different mediums that we can get as much public information as possible. And after that, I will also send you some of the dates I have from PGAB as far as potential dates they're open to have your next meeting as well. So I'll send those out tomorrow. And we can get the next meeting put away for this body as well. So I've got several dates. I've got several ranges of dates, but we're gonna try to get the October, November dates set up. Send that out tomorrow.
How can we raise the awareness? Find survey for the community.
Well, I would encourage all of you guys to share either through like Nextdoor, your Facebook, any other social media out. I mean, called X now, Twitter, X. We'll put it out. I'll talk to the board. We might even be doing some potential mailings. That information out, especially in the most adjacent communities. Getting those people to, hey, we do the postcard mailing. I'm not sure about it. Board's okay with that. We can. But we're going to try a couple different mediums to try to get that information out. There's a good group of people who are connected with also by collecting their email addresses, connected with online now. So I feel like we'll probably get that word out as long as we get out.
Like Darting Prairie Days.
That's also a perfect one. If we can get something set up in the next few days, I will certainly make sure that we have flyers printed out and available this weekend for Prairie Day, which is Saturday. So the city's informational booth. We also always have the opportunity to signs around town, which we do for most of our meetings as it is. So we can always take some of those for creating plastic signs. There's plenty of times you just print something, rubber cemented to that corrugated plastic sign, stick that sucker on every entrance to every subdivision. Part out. So
I wonder if any of the local businesses allow us to put a flyer or something.
we've done that down Square Pub and Grub, and we can,
Yeah.
I'm sure we can do that in a few other places too.
We can help with the media for that. If we do want to go with a postcard flyer or something like, we can certainly help you put that together. We've got graphic designers on staff that have done that for a comprehensive planning processes. Yeah. Well, if any other questions before we stop?
Just,
Yeah.
Just some of the ideas that you heard tonight, and they're really good ones, but I think is the input that we kind of need to get some data on would be, what's the key draw to the area? There was a couple of concepts here. The major ones were hotel, convention, and event, as far as utilizing some of the space, dining, entertainment, recreation, as three others, as far as defining what is the focus of the draw to bring people to this corridor that we're talking about, to design it around, some hub thing, because conventional retail is not going to be it. I mean, you've got everything you need between Hawk Ridge and what we have and what K Street has. So it's going to be unique in some of the ideas here as far as how does that draw then tie into the unique retail that we're talking. The specialty food store that you mentioned is a good idea, the farmer's market idea. So all those ideas that you heard tonight, it's like, how do we focus on the draw and how do we then bring in the coffee shop idea, the tying into the soccer, volleyball, and sports recreation that exists, and the recreation that we might create? Is there a pickleball facility like Missouri Pickleball Club in Fenton, for example? Is that a draw point? Don't know, but just what brings people here, and then build the city around that.
I think that's a very good point.
So James, my understanding is you'll have some dates for us shortly
First thing in the morning,
to
maybe
review.
tonight.
Anyone
That's what
have?
my kids are doing when I get home.
They'll be asleep.
That's right. Hopefully asleep, doubtful.
Yeah. Anyone have anything else you want to bring before the committee, before we close committee for this evening?
So, with the website, the survey, is that something we're gonna get a chance to look at before it goes live, or is that something?
No, you guys are our filter to the community, the steering committee. That's one of the reasons why you're formed. And so we'll share that for feedback, any additional questions that you feel like we missed. Some that you don't want to ask, I don't know. It's, just provide feedback. We're looking for you as a gateway to the community. Yeah. And
We're having
before,
public engagement for that steering committee meeting, that email or online, you're gonna show us like a mock-up and then we can look at it.
and an opportunity to take the survey too, as a test, I think that would be a good idea. And that gives you some feel for, hey, we're missing this, or we've got it all. Before we close, I just wanted to thank you, for your time tonight. It's fun getting to spend a couple hours with you. Won't have to hear from me. You'll have to hear, you'll get to hear from Lindsay and our other staff a lot more throughout this process. So I just want to thank you for that.
I'd like to thank you for your time. Good start. Anything else that you'd like to bring again before the committee, before we call it an evening?
Had one quick suggestion about using the Prairie Days to start the survey awareness is something that we do at the Lake of the Ozarks when people are driving by boats and they don't have a lot of time, but something's real visible is put a URL, a big one that people can just use their phone and go to a site for a survey. It's really easy, super easy for them to do. They could do it right there on the
Say
spot.
QR code.
Yes, a QR code. I'm sorry, I said the wrong.
I thought I heard you say URL, but I
I
thought you
did.
meant QR
I
code.
did. I'm not a real techie person.
That's.
But that's what I meant is, when I see those, I scan them just to see what's going on. I started seeing that in St. Charles is what made me think of it tonight. Is, there was a couple of those notices from St. Charles up and down Clark Street. And, they were advertising some things that the city was doing that very big visual on the sign and you couldn't help it when you know what it was.
That's a great idea. Thank
Yeah, good idea. All right, anyone else? Anything? Not entertain a motion to close this meeting? Anyone have motion? Motion, seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good evening.
No problem.
I was trying to look some.
Got a question for you. So we had one person that